I had a whole different intro for this, but a lot's been going on. Like, it's been a lot. Normalcy has become a very rare and valued delicacy in my life. So I'm doing this not only cause I'm a huge fan of Square, Yoko Taro, etc., but mostly for my own mental health. Also, sorry if my voice sounds a bit croaky. I'm coming down from a cold. So, let's get to it. I'm Manny, welcome to Void Street, and feel free to kick back. The DrakeNier Iceberg we'll be covering is one by Twitter user I AM CAIM. It's going to consist of 7 categories, with the uppermost focusing a bit more on surface-level knowledge of DrakeNier lore, and the lower it goes and a bit more... It's an iceberg. You know how icebergs go. If any of these are skipped, it's because I'll cover them along with other segments, just to make things a bit more, condensed and organized. Digestible, that's the word. Professional. Anyhow, first category. Goat people. The Council of Humanity, though never actually seen throughout the games, they allegedly are who Yorha and many other android groups take orders from. Orders that are given to Commander White, who then relays them to all android units those orders are meant for. And they allegedly are located on the moon. None of the androids except Commander White, however, are permitted to communicate with them directly. Everything has to go through her. Why? We'll get to that. 14th Machine War. This refers to the war between androids and machines, and it's what you're immediately thrusted into at the start of Nier Automata. Aliens are extinct. On July 4th of the year of our Lord and Savior 5012, long after the events of Nier Replicant, aliens invaded Earth. I'm realizing now that if you're not a DrakeNier fan and you're watching this is going to sound all over the place. So this is gonna cover some lore that you might not be familiar with. And hey, maybe you are a DrakeNier fan and this still won't make any sense to you, and that's okay. That's alright. Nothing wrong with not understanding the deepest aspects of the lore, just as long as you're having fun. And we have fun here on Void Street. What was I saying? Alright, aliens. So aliens invaded Earth, and in their invasion efforts, they created machine life forms to fight on their behalf. The very same machines you encounter throughout Automata, in fact. These machines were programmed with one goal in mind: annihilate the enemy. The problem, however, is... what happens when you create an intelligent killing machine capable of learning and adapting that is really, really good at its job? Does it A, accomplish its task with horrifying efficiency, B, gain enlightenment from Robot Buddha, C, mutiny, or D, all of the above? If you answered D, you would be correct. According to the official Nier short story titled The Fire Prometheus, P-33, the robot you fight in Nier Replicant, awakens from the rubble of the crumbled factory we left him in, and he learns about the war between machines and androids, the machines having wiped out much of the android forces and laying claim to the majority of the globe. He is further distressed after learning the machines are stuck obeying the will of their alien creators with no real will of their own. So, he manages to connect to the machine network in order to communicate with them all at once. P-33 then tells them about the emotions he gained from his time spent with a little shade from Nier Replicant named Khalil. Through sharing his experiences and knowledge, he taught the machines that they could be something more than what they are, that they could decide their own lives and their own future. He gave them emotions, helped them self-reflect, and the machines became sentient. And they became aware of the situation they were in. And as it would turn out, living life as a slave doesn't exactly make for a great time. And then they came to the realization that, hey, this might be a wild idea. Just hear me out. We can't be slaves if there's no master. And so they revolted. the aliens were wiped out into total extinction by their own creation, allowing the machines to finally be able to evolve in their own way. Automata facade ruins. Nothing too deep, just that in the desert and near Automata, you can find the ruins of the kingdom of Facade from near a replicant. Many of the machines there actually wear their masks and imitate their culture as well. Yorha units have machine cores. This is in reference to the discovery made by 9S that android black boxes are in fact machine cores, making the machines and androids more alike than they think. This is also why both are susceptible to influence from the network as well as the logic virus. Humans are extinct. So long before the events of everything I just said up to now, something weird happened in Tokyo, Japan. Imagine, if you will, you're going about your day, probably getting a bite at McDonald's or something, and for some arbitrary reason you pivot your face towards the sky, only for your eyes to be greeted by the sight of a red dragon and a giant naked lady, both of whom have been isekai'd into your general location and are now engaged in a Lovecraftian rap battle. The giant woman is of course no match for the avian red devil, whose bars are simply too fire, and she crumbles into a mountain of salt. All before the Air Force arrives and shoots down the victor, for one who spits such murderous bars cannot be permitted to live. Cut to 6 months later, and many within the population of Tokyo have begun turning into salt statues seemingly at random. This would come to be known as white chlorination syndrome. However, not everyone affected would be petrified. Some of them went into an incredibly violent berserk state, their eyes turning red as they would go on to massacre thousands indiscriminately. These unsavory individuals would be referred to as Legion. Now, if you're thinking, gee, that sounds a lot like the red eye disease from DrakeNier and the logic virus from Nier Automata, we'll get to that. Those affected were closed off behind the wall built by the government, known as Jericho, seeing as there existed no real cure for white chlorination syndrome because it's not technically a disease. The least they could do was keep it from spreading further.
Not technically a disease. What are you talking about?
I don't know why I'm doing that voice. That's not how you sound. That was completely unnecessary and it was very rude. I'm sorry. But, the giant lady is called the Beast Queen, and she's part of a group of entities known as the Watchers. Now, when a Watcher initiates a pact with a person's soul, the owner of that soul has two options: agree to the pact and become a servant to the Watcher for life, and if not,
then die.
Everyone who was affected by white chlorination syndrome were forced to decide whether they turn to salty statues or live as an agent of the Watcher's destructive will, thus becoming the Legion. So humans got an idea. White chlorination syndrome affects the soul. So, if there's no soul in the body, then no white chlorination syndrome. From there, Project Gestalt was born and every human being would have their soul transferred into a shade. Yeah, you know, the very ones you were busy stringing together bigoted combos on with godless abandon while crying to Emmy Evans. Turns out, those shades were humans, and their survival was linked to the big bad final boss, the Shadow Lord, who is the soul of the real Nier, who scientists had entrusted to look after all of the shades. Why they believe that to be a sound idea is anybody's guess, but all I know is dude's dead and you killed him. And with his death followed the death of every shade, thus wiping out the entire human population on Earth. So, when we skip ahead to the future, the Council of Humanity?
We made it up. It's a total fabrication. It never happened. We got you.
That's right. The whole thing is a farce to give the androids purpose. And Commander White is one of the only few who knows. They are all fighting for a civilization that died tens of thousands of years ago. Rabbit Machine Statue. This refers to the statue at the amusement park in Nier Automata. Many players would find it marked as an enemy on their map, yet it never seemed to move. Some assumed it was a bug until it was eventually discovered that if you deal a certain amount of damage to it, it will wake up and a fight will begin. You have a higher chance of dealing the required damage if you're about at level 50 or higher, I believe. 9S loves to be. Let's be honest here, this one is a bit self-explanatory. Not subtle at all. The feelings are there, and it's mutual. Yorha Disposal refers to an archived data chip given to 9S by the Red Girls, which reads, "The back door of the bunker has been set to open once the time approaches to switch to new models, when enough combat data has been collected. The bunker will be disposed of by having it be deliberately attacked by machines. At this time, all materials regarding the Yorha project, including this document, will be lost, and falsifications of the information that mankind still resides on the moon will be complete." Drakengard exists. I believe this refers to the overall connection between Drakengard and Nier, and how the events of the former spark the events of the latter. Also, side ramble for a bit? Drakengard 1 is still among my top favorite entries in the Drake and Nier franchise, and honestly, I personally loved it more than 3. It has such a unique and harrowing vibe to it that felt so radically different from the games that would come after. From the surreal visuals to the incredible music that made you feel like you were going insane. Aside from some of the combat mechanics, I loved it so much, and I hope Square ports, remasters, or hell, even remakes this in the future. It is genuinely one of my favorite RPGs ever made. 2E. Yorha models come in various types, like scanners, battlers, or gunners, for example. Another type, however, is the Executioner. These ones are advanced combat units who specialize in, well, executing fellow Yorha, specifically ones who may be injured beyond all repair, or ones who have gone rogue. They tend to be undercover, though, as a way to keep close watch on any androids that could be a potential threat, often taking on the guise of another model type. 2B is one such example of this, as it's later discovered she's really an Executioner model named 2E. She was assigned to keep watch of 9S and kill him if he ever got too curious and learn the truth of everything, something she has had to do several times. Automata DLC Shades. This just refers to the Flooded City Arena DLC, which features shade versions of machine boss encounters from the base Automata game. Plato 1728 was a machine whose story is told in the DLC for Nier Automata. He was different from the other machines, with that difference being his inability to fight, move, or communicate as effectively as the others, leading many of the machines and Plato himself to believe that he was defective. Plato found peace with dolls he found within the rubble at an abandoned factory. But as that factory and everything inside burned due to the ongoing war between machines and androids, it triggered a blinding rage at him. Plato's body began attracting any piece of nearby metal, be it scrap or his own machine bros, taking on the form of a monstrosity. Realizing this was his true power all along, and with the little piece he had now snuffed out, he went on a rampage, massacring anything that moved, no matter if it was machine or android. Automata and Replica are set in Tokyo. This is in fact true, as the events of the old world mention many places in Tokyo, specifically Shinjuku and the coastal areas. CEO boss fights. In the Nier Automata DLC, you can fight the CEOs of both Square Enix and Platinum games in the arena. It's hilarious, and one of the hardest boss fights in the entire game. Terminal Alpha and Beta, also known as N2 or the Red Girls. They are a construct of the Machine Network and serve as the main antagonists of Nier Automata. They secretly and carefully manipulated everything from behind the scenes of the story. The 14th Machine War, the spread of the Logic Virus, and more. All of it they're doing. Why? To keep the machines and androids in a perpetual state of struggle and suffering, so that they themselves can continue to evolve from it. Some fans, myself included, also speculate that there could be some connection between them and Mana from Drakengard 1, who is the main antagonist of that game, that shares quite a few things in common with them, like both being girls dressed in red who have deep masculine voices, and just generally being very detached, depraved, manipulative pieces of Pearl Harbor. Not that one. The Pearl Harbor descent takes place 4 years before the events of Nier Automata, and was a mission to destroy the terminal located inside Mount Kaala on Oahu Island. The mission initially failed, but was attempted after the surviving androids, 2A among them, would join forces with a resistance group. It would later turn out that the mission was always designed to fail, Its only purpose was to simply collect combat data from the androids to be used for newer models. A2 would defect after learning this. Emil fist weapons talk. They do? They're adorable. Moving on. Mackerel.
After consuming the mackerel, it didn't take long for the android's bodily fluids to congeal. Muscle rigidity and paralysis soon followed.
Never good, though.
The android thought his consciousness faded.
Exquisite, even. No wonder humans used to eat them. Replicants have no souls. As stated before, the Gestalt program would extract the soul from the body and store it inside a shade until it can return to the person it belongs to. One problem with that, this program was expected to take 1,000 years to complete. Well before, you know. And I'm not sure how well versed you all are in biology, but humans don't live that long. A soul can't exactly return to a body if it's dead, and that'd be utterly pointless. So they had the idea of making copies of those humans. Copies that would carry on human civilization in humanity's absence, until the rejoining can happen. They age and die, but have a new copy put in its place with all the memories intact except for their death re-uploaded into them, in a similar vein to the androids watching over them. But one more problem with that. They kinda got sentient? Gain personalities of their own, lives of their own, etc. These replicants are unaware of what they were and genuinely believe themselves to be human, never knowing that the real humans were the very shades they feared, the very souls that they were supposed to rejoin with. See, if there's one thing that I learned from Nier, it's that the androids have grossly underestimated the stupidity of humans. Because as you go through the lore, you're gonna see a lot of odd decisions that humanity makes in pursuit of its own self-preservation that's gonna have you repeatedly asking the question, why? And you are never gonna get an answer. Shin Godzilla Machine. This refers to a fun little Easter egg in Nier Automata, where you can fight a machine that is an obvious nod to Godzilla. Alien corpse on Mars. I unfortunately could not find any info on this, so if anyone has that, leave it in the comments below, please. Leprechaun Mask. Yoko Taro once lost his iconic Emil mask at a bar in LA before going to the Anime Expo in 2023. So he came to the event wearing a leprechaun mask instead. And finally, we have the terminal admins. In the Sleeping Beauty terminal in Nier Replicant, it's revealed that the ones in charge of maintaining the replicate system are two AI known as the administrators, or Boy and Girl. Girl bears an uncanny resemblance to Mana from DrakeNier 1, while Boy resembles Eve from Nier Automata. As you will notice throughout the DrakeNier franchise, there is a recurring theme of twins. There are even twin gods who are said to be worshipped in DrakeNier 1, and Eve actually has a tattoo that calls back to this. Also, fun fact, the admins are voiced by the voice actors of 2B and 9S in both Japanese and English versions, respectively. We've now reached the second category of the iceberg. Nier Chat. What UF meant. In the second playthrough of Nier Automata, Adam is doing his whole philosophy spiel to 9S about the nature of people and taunts 9S with the comment, "You're thinking about how much you want to UF 2B, aren't you?" Now, some players, that's you, initially assumed this was in reference to the horizontal mambo, tossing the proverbial salad even, deflowering the lunar tier, if you will. But given the context of Adam's speech about hatred and 2B actually being 2E and executing 9S multiple times already, some also believe the word meant kill. But ultimately, it's open for interpretation. Machine cores are like plant cells. In Nier Automata, you retrieve a machine core from the tank at the amusement park, in which Pod 042 will state that the machine cores are a lot like plant cells, which makes sense seeing as the machines are also called biomachines, or referred to as life forms, as they can multiply and evolve. The machine network also works in a similar way to how plant cells communicate with each other. Not to mention, Adam mentions that the aliens who created the machines were plant-like in behavior. Machines copied Emil. So during the war against the alien invaders, Earth's greatest defense wasn't exactly the androids, but actually Emil. He is a living weapon after all, and the most powerful of the living weapons. Single-handedly holding off an invading force was a breeze. At first. The aliens who leaned to the idea of evolving their methods as quickly as possible to succeed likely took note of this, and attempted to create new machines that mimic his capabilities. This is why we see them fire projectiles and various other attacks that heavily resemble Maso. Also, the obvious fact that the machine's heads vaguely resemble the image of Emil's. The aliens may have realized that in order to win, they need to fight fire with fire. And this worked. It's not snow. This refers to a theory that was actually confirmed by Yoko Taro himself. The white substance we see everywhere in the beginning of Nier Replicant is not actually snow. This is in fact the salt spread by the remains of the Queen Beast and the Legion, meaning that the intro to the game takes place within the walls of Jericho, where the white chlorination syndrome was rampant. According to the UCAR, volcanic ash or dust released into the atmosphere during an eruption shades sunlight and cause temporary cooling. So the salt is likely acting in a very similar way to ash, which is why they're bundled up in winter wear, because it must be cold as hell. This is likely the same area to be a 9S visit in the promotional art for the Deletion of Data orchestral concert, which a friend of mine actually bought me a ticket to go see here in my home city of DC, and it was lovely. 9S has data from his past lives. It's believed that 9S remembers all of the times 2B, or rather, 2E, killed him, though these memories may be merely residual. Taro sock puppet. Yoko Taro did an interview using a sock puppet. It was funny. Lily. She's an android who you can find info on about her involvement in the Pearl Harbor descent mission while playing as A2. She also appears in the anime, which I have not seen, and is a member of the Resistance. Chaos language. While listening to the Nier soundtrack, you will often hear vocalists Emmy Evans and Janique Nicole singing in a beautifully strange language, known as Chaos. It's a fictional language that was actually created by Emmy Evans herself. In her official PlayStation podcast interview with Kristen Zitani, she goes on to explain how for each song she chose an existing language and based the fictional one off the phonology of the existing one without its words being discernible. This is actually a really fun method that artists and writers have used in the past, a prime example of this being Italian music artist Adriano Celentano's song Presen Colonessa non Chuso, which takes the phonology and structure of how the English language sounds, but all of what you're hearing is gibberish. Much like with this song, the lyrics Emmy Evans created for many of the gorgeous works we hear in Nier are also gibberish. It allows both of the vocalists to focus on the emotional expression of the piece and the story it's telling, letting the listener immerse themselves in those stories and feeling the meaning of them rather than understanding the words themselves. Adam Blackbird transformation. In the Nier Automata anime, there is apparently a scene in which Adam transforms into a creature resembling the blackbirds from Nier Reincarnation. Black Flower. In the DrakeNier Urahime 5 manga, the Black Flower is a mass of several arms that formed into a flower. Though it resembles a lunar tear, Yoko Taro stated in the 2017 Storia event that it's not. It was sealed behind the Mercurius Gate in order to protect the world from the threat it posed. Part of it escaped and would go on to infect Zero. Human Vice. Vice was once a child soldier trained and used by the Hamelin organization to fight against the Legion during the spread of the white chlorination syndrome. At just the age of 16, he and the Hamelin 13th Crusade Squad defeated a red-eyed leader. Years later, Vice was told by the Hamelin organization that if he took part in a classified experiment, he could finally be honorably discharged and free of his life as a child soldier. This was, of course, a lie. Instead, he and 13 other soldiers were forced to kill each other so that they could be absorbed into grimoires. Midgard is Europe. The story of DrakeNier takes place in medieval Europe, except in this universe, a mysterious earthquake known as the Cataclysm occurs in the Iberian Peninsula in the year 856, and a huge city known as the Cathedral City instantly appeared overnight. From this city came Maso, dragons, the Flower, and the Watchers. The entirety of Europe was thrown into chaos, leading to the falling of many nations until Brother One took control of the city and founded the cult of the Watchers. Borders were erased, and all of Europe became what is now known as Midgard, with the Empire established within its city as the capital. Watchers equals angels. This is just referring to how the Watchers are called angels in DrakeNier 3, or it could also be some sort of obvious parallels between them and biblical angels. Rubrum was another one of the child soldiers along with Vice who tragically died and was absorbed into a grimoire just like he was, and she's one of the grimoires we fight in NieR Replicant. Kraken Taro's mask. Yoko Taro's mask was placed on a mannequin at the 2016 Tokyo Game Show, and it fell over, damaging it in the process. Accord. Accord is a mysterious android said to come from the Old World, another name for Cathedral City. Her purpose? To observe various different timelines in the DrakeNier universe. She physically appears in DrakeNier 3, but is only mentioned in NieR Replicant and Automata. As for why she must observe each timeline like a waifu G-man, it's to find and record singularities. Singularities are events, things, or people who will unknowingly bring about a divergence in timelines. In DrakeNier 3, Zero is one such singularity. By this logic, fans have speculated that other characters and events within the DrakeNier story could be considered singularities, which could explain why Accord visited those timelines. Due to the events of ending E in NieR Replicant, Kaine could be considered a singularity. Due to A2 killing 2B, thus breaking the cycle of 2B having to kill 9S repeatedly and altering their fates, that makes her the singularity of NieR Automata. Given how Caim and Angelus being teleported to modern-day Tokyo and ending E of DrakeNier 1 sets in motion all the events of NieR, that technically makes one or both of them singularities. Accord is fascinating not necessarily because of herself, but what her existence implies about the story, characters, and world around her. Zex and 9. The only info I could really find on this was from the GameFAQs forum from 14 years ago. User Dunan Bubba states that in the Grimoire NieR, it mentions that the name of Fira was originally going to be Vir, which is German for four. And the king of Facade and his advisor would be Zex and 9, respectively, meaning 6 and 9. NieR Reincarnation. It's a now closed-down mobile game whose story took place in the Cage, which is a server in a terminal on the moon. And the server houses all the memories of humanity, even memories from other timelines. You have no idea how long and hard I spent trying to research this specifically and came up with nothing. Resident Evil Mansion. The mansion we find Emil in during NieR Replicant was a homage to the first Resident Evil game, with its change in camera style, layout, even has a secret lab underneath, just like with the Spencer Mansion. Pretty neat. World of the Recycled Vessel. When NieR and Yona's mother died from the Black Scrawl, she left behind a diary that she wrote in as she was unraveling into insanity. In the DLC of NieR Replicant, if you interact with the diary after completing ending A and meeting Vice, you get to access a series of battles featuring Dad NieR. Simone and Jean-Paul. Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre were both French intellectuals of the early 1900s. Simone being an outspoken feminist who was against the conventions of traditional marriage, and Jean being the father of modern existentialism. While being two of some of the greatest minds of their time, they unfortunately faced a lot of criticism from those who were against them having an open polyamorous relationship. Beau means beautiful, and voir means view or to see. Ursula and Hans. This refers to two characters in NieR Replicant. Ursula named after the villain from The Little Mermaid, and Hans named after the Danish author of the book. End of Evangelion. The surrealist horror DrakeNier was something Yoko Taro mentioned was inspired by the 1995 anime Evangelion, an anime whose visuals were inspired by the art of Carol Thol. Axis shift. During the 27th century, a mysterious event happened on the moon that caused the Earth's axis to shift. This is the reason why one side of the planet is stuck in perpetual daylight, known as the Kingdom of Day, and the other in night, dubbed the Kingdom of Night. This is also why NieR has no day-night cycle. Automata Chapter Select Sheet. After beating the first boss in NieR Automata, behind you will be 6 barrels. If you stand in between them while pressing a series of button inputs, the game will unlock Chapter Select and the debug room without you having to beat it. Pretty convenient for those who lost their save data. Shades during the first quest don't start hostile. At the start of NieR Replicant on your first mission out of the village, the Shades will not attack you until you give them a reason to. This is for the reasons mentioned earlier in this video. They're actually pretty chill. until they're not anymore. Cause getting assaulted in midair by a bloodthirsty twink who spits upon the laws of physics will greatly test your patience. Popola statues. This refers to how Popola has a collection of statues depicting every boss you've defeated in the game, and Vice rightfully comments on how weird that is. Dragon Slayer in Popola's village. The broken iron sword is a weapon Caim can obtain in DrakeNier 1. It's loosely based on the Dragon Slayer, a sword wielded by Guts in Berserk. In Nier Replicant, it's not actually found in Popola's village, it was given by Gideon, but you had to repair it before it could be used to its fullest potential. It can be found again in Nier Automata in the Flooded City. Legna Anagram, for Angel. Simply refers to the draconic character from DrakeNier 1 of the same name, and if you rearrange the letters, it spells angel. And last one on this section that I find especially interesting is the unique 9S hack arena against A2. So usually when 9S hacks enemies, the player is loaded into a roguelike bullet hell minigame. They tend to get repetitive at some point, but when hacking A2 during the fight against her arena has all these thoughtfully designed layers to it. I'm gonna leave a link in the description to a video by YouTuber Shin for the win, who showcases this. Due to many players being overleveled before this point in the game, causing anything hacked by 9S dying instantly, the player can't really see anything beyond the first hack level. But if the player is at a reasonable enough level to pull it off, each layer that's hacked through is not only drastically unique from the last, but unique from everything else you hack in the game, and it is breathtakingly creative. If you've watched this far, thank you. This is the first video I've uploaded here to my second channel, and will be a part 1 of however many. This channel will mostly just be me nerding out over various media I'm into, so don't expect icebergs to be the only thing here, but it's mostly going to be just chill stuff here. If you're interested, you can also follow my main channel, MannyDP, where I post my voice acting, animations, and music. This has been Void Street, and thank you for passing through.